Hello, welcome back to meetrabbits.org. Today, talking about using dried fall leaves as a treat or a foraged food for rabbits. So, I'm going to say this right off from the beginning. There's not a heck of a lot of information out there. The information that I am finding on this topic is coming from other meat rabbit growers, other rabbit breeders, and then when you try and look further into this and find some sites and sources and information, you get things like houserabbits.com saying, oh my God, don't feed them, they're going to be a source of mold. And you know, yes, we need to kind of pay some attention to that and consider that, but also that's not really a source that I typically would think of as a quality source. And also I try to avoid pet and like house rabbit sites because I think they tend to baby and err really strongly on the side of caution. And you know, if you do that to too great of an extent, then you're never doing anything with your rabbits. And I wouldn't recommend trying to do any forage feed. I would just say feed water and pellets, because if you're that nervous about it, you're not going to be happy regardless. But I did start seeing some videos pop up around, being fall and being where I am in New England, we have plenty of deciduous trees, fall leaves falling down, dry. They're plentiful, they're abundant. These videos and things started popping up in a lot of the rabbitries that I follow, and the sources that I follow, I'm pretty picky about who I actually follow online. So they're typically somebody that looks like either they're a reputable resource like a university or extension or something like that, and yes, some of those I even take with a grain of salt, or they are reputable breeders and rabbitries who I think probably have had enough experience to recommend things. So again, just to say, first off, everybody needs to kind of take it with a grain of salt, whether it's my advice or anyone else's advice, and decide what's right or wrong for you or what risk you're willing to take. But it does appear that dried fall leaves could be a nice treat for your rabbits. Now, we know that lots of sticks and twigs can help with boredom, can be a source of fiber, and even sometimes some trace nutrition. And that's kind of the case with the leaves as well. But you can see that the rabbits, they really love them. I never really thought to give any to my rabbits before until I started seeing these videos, but I've been seeing them around, and yeah, they really attack them. I think Flory over here, she's probably looking for more. She seems to like them more than anybody else, but especially because as they brought these cages in to, set up the barn this week, and they had been sitting outside, so we had lots of leaves in them. I cleaned out the bulk of them because I also just didn't want to hit my rabbits too hard at once with a new food that they weren't used to. So, following that rule to introduce anything new slowly and in moderation. So what I did was let them have them that first day. I took out all the extras that, like I said, I didn't want them to get too crazy with the leaves and then have a problem. And then I watched them for a day or two to make sure nobody was having any issues, and nobody did. So I let them have a few more. So that being said, in terms of benefits, hard to say what the benefits are, other than that the rabbits really like them. It's a fun treat and something that's a little different for them to have. So there's that, but nutritionally speaking, really hard to find any information on that. Couple of, like West Meadow Rabbitry, a couple of them claim things like source of fiber is the biggest one. And other than that, some trace minerals and nutrition. And then some of the leaves, like an oak leaf, some sources say not to feed it because of the tannins. They're saying that actually they benefit from the tannins as parasite control. So, I do believe that there's a lot of natural kind of parasite and control and support out there, just like us herbal medicine I do think is a thing. It's just that I think it's hard to be skilled, and it takes some work and some time to get at it. But if you're willing to kind of put that in and do some playing, see how it goes. Probably the bigger thing is just to be aware of what kind of trees and therefore leaves you have, whether it's in your yard or wherever you're gathering leaves from. You want to kind of take a look around, see what kind of trees they are, and then cross-reference that with some of the sites, like the safe food and forage sites for rabbits. Beyond the Pellet is a good source, maintains some really good lists, as well as the website of that author, or at least one of the authors, and that is Rise and Shine Rabbitry. So if you come on over to meetrabbits.org to the accompanying article for this, you'll find in there some links to West Meadow and to Rise and Shine and some of the sources, the little bit of university sources that I was able to dig up. I won't say that they were specifically geared towards this topic, but they did have some information to offer in there in terms of kind of safe trees and forage and treats that you could give to your rabbits. So that might help give you a better idea of figuring out whether there's something that you think is potentially toxic in your yard, that you would want to avoid those leaves. And frankly, if you had like a significant source in your yard of trees that were potentially risky, then I wouldn't even bother doing this, because how are you going to sort out the leaves? So you're not, One of the other benefits to using the leaves is that they can be a fiber source. So if you're someone who's feeding hay along with your pellets or as part of your diet for fiber purposes and to keep digestion going, then leaves can be a good way to kind of either replace. I probably would not completely replace your hay, but they can cut down on the hay that you can feed by being a source of fiber, just a different source. I think in ending here, what we need to think about is, that the rule of thumb with foraging and feeding anything is to kind of think about how rabbits eat in nature. And rabbits don't eat only one thing of anything. They graze, they forage, they're eating a large variety of foods. So, thinking along those lines, potentially, if we were to feed anything in abundance or only one type of thing, you could potentially cause a digestive problem for your rabbits. But if we kind of follow that rule of nature, where we're giving them a little bit of different things to choose from, we're balancing out the diet with different ingredients, even if those ingredients are as simple as pellets, hay, and then some leaves, then they're doing what they naturally do, and that would be a natural way for the rabbits to eat. So I wouldn't ever say that anything, even as we pick along these different things, we've talked about elderflowers and raspberry leaves and blackberry leaves and some different things, and we'll explore some others in the future. None of those are meant to be fed as be-all, end-all, cure-all, anything. They're just meant to be fed as part of a diet. So that's what I've got on fall leaves. I was actually hoping that there would be a little bit more out there in the body of reputable resources. I felt it was safe enough to try it with my rabbits. Haven't had any issues here. Very interested to hear if anybody else has fed leaves, if this is something you regularly do, if you save them up for the winter. You want to make sure that they're clean, dry, and they're kept that way if you are storing them for winter. There are some potential issues that, you're picking them up off the ground, so maybe you are carrying in some mite exposure, coccidiosis. You need to decide your level of comfort with that. If you've got, say, rabbits and tractors, that's certainly not going to be any worse than something like that. But it all kind of comes back to how you run your barn and your program, and how kind of closed you keep them, especially caged rabbits, where you're going through the effort to control the environment and control their exposures. Think about things like that. So again, let me hear it if you've used it. If you have anything to add or offer, any good links to information, share them with everybody. Come on over to meetrabbits.org, see the information and links that are over there that kind of support this idea. And thanks for being here, and come back next time.